I always thought I had it all figured out. My name is Mary Anderson, and for 30 years, I've been living what most people would call a perfect life in Maplewood, New York. My husband, Richard, was a successful lawyer at the top of his game, and our daughter, Emily, grew up to be this bright, independent woman who made me proud every single day. We lived in a cozy house with white picket fences, hosted dinner parties that everyone raved about, and spent holidays together like something out of a Hallmark movie. But here's the thing about perfection. It's usually just an illusion. Lately, though, cracks were starting to show. Richard had been coming home later than usual, spending hours locked in his study, and avoiding conversations about work. At first, I brushed it off as stress or maybe midlife crisis stuff. You know, the kind men go through when they hit their 50s. But deep down, there was this nagging feeling, this tiny voice whispering that something wasn't right. Emily was always Daddy's little girl. She adored him and he doted on her. Even now, at 26, she still called him almost daily to check in or ask for advice. Sometimes I felt like I was on the outside looking in, watching their bond grow stronger while mine with Richard seemed to fade into the background. Don't get me wrong, I loved my daughter fiercely, but there were moments when I wondered if she saw me as more than just mom. Like last weekend, for instance, when she came over from Manhattan to visit. She brought these fancy pastries from some trendy bakery in the city, and we sat around the kitchen table chatting. But every time I tried to steer the conversation toward Richard's odd behavior lately, his late nights, his distracted demeanor, she clammed up. It was subtle, but I noticed. There was a defensiveness in her tone, a flicker of discomfort in her eyes. That's when the doubt crept in. Was I imagining things? Or did Emily know something I didn't? It started with a birthday card. A simple, innocent-looking card tucked inside one of Richard's desk drawers. I found it by accident one afternoon while tidying up his study. He hated clutter, so I often took it upon myself to organize his papers and files. The card itself wasn't unusual, a generic floral design, but the message inside stopped me cold. For my love, Richard. Thank you for everything. Love, L. Who is L? And why was someone signing a card to my husband with such intimacy? My hands trembled as I held it, my mind racing with questions. When Richard got home that evening, I confronted him. His reaction was immediate. He dismissed it as nothing, claiming it must have been a mistake from an old client. But his explanation didn't sit right with me. Why would a client send him a personal birthday card? And why did he look so guilty? After finding the card, I couldn't shake the feeling that Richard was hiding something. I began noticing little things I'd ignored before because I trusted him. His shirts smelled faintly of perfume, though he swore he hadn't worn cologne in years. His phone buzzed constantly, but whenever I walked into the room, he'd quickly silence it. One night, curiosity got the better of me. While he was in the shower, I picked up his phone and scrolled through his messages. Most of them were harmless, but then I saw it. A string of texts from an unknown number. They weren't explicit, but they were filled with coded affection. Thinking of you. Can't wait to see you tonight. You're amazing. My heart sank. Who was this person? And how long had this been going on? For the first time in 30 years, I felt like a stranger in my own marriage. I decided I needed answers. If Richard wouldn't give them to me willingly, I'd find them myself. So one Thursday evening, after he told me he'd be working late again, I followed him. Driving behind his car felt surreal, like I was stepping into a scene from a thriller movie. I trailed him to a sleek apartment building downtown, my pulse pounding in my ears. As he parked and headed inside, I waited nervously in my car. Then I saw her. A young woman emerged from the lobby, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, and hugged Richard tightly. She kissed him on the cheek before they disappeared together into the building. I wanted to scream, to storm in there and demand an explanation. But I couldn't move. All I could do was sit there, frozen as tears streamed down my face. Her name was Laura. I recognized her from pictures Richard kept in his office. She worked at his firm. How could he do this to me? To us? When I got home that night, I was a wreck. I paced the living room, trying to process what I'd seen. Just as I was debating whether to confront Richard immediately, Emily walked in. She looked startled to see me sitting there, red-eyed and disheveled. Without saying a word, she hurried upstairs toward Richard's study. Something about her urgency set off alarm bells in my head. Quietly, I followed her. Through the crack in the door, I watched as she rifled through his desk drawers, pulling out documents and photos. When she turned around and saw me standing there, she froze. What are you doing? I demanded, my voice shaking. Emily hesitated, then muttered, I'm just helping Dad keep things organized. Organized? More like covering his tracks. In that moment, I realized the betrayal ran deeper than I'd imagined. Not only had Richard cheated on me, but my own daughter had helped him hide it. I cornered Emily in the kitchen later that night. Tell me the truth, I said, my voice low but firm. How long have you known about your father and Laura? She avoided my gaze, fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. Finally, she admitted she'd known for months. Months. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Why would you help him? I asked, my voice breaking. Because I thought I was protecting our family, she replied, tears welling up in her eyes. Dad said if anyone found out it would ruin everything. I didn't want to lose him. Her words stung, not because they were cruel but because they cut so close to home. Did she really think keeping secrets was the way to protect us? Or was she just scared of facing the truth herself? Whatever her reasons, I couldn't forgive her. Not yet. Not when I was still reeling from the betrayal of the man I loved. The next morning I confronted Richard. I laid everything out. The card, the texts, the late-night trips to Laura's apartment. At first he denied it all, his face pale and sweaty. But when I showed him the evidence, he crumbled. He confessed that he'd been seeing Laura for over a year, that their affair had started casually but spiraled out of control. He begged me to forgive him, promising to end things with her and make our marriage work again. But it was too late. 30 years of trust had shattered in an instant. I told him to leave, to pack his things and get out of my house. As he stormed upstairs, Emily tried to intervene, pleading with me to calm down and talk it through. But I couldn't listen. My family, the one I'd built and cherished, was falling apart and I didn't know how to pick up the pieces. After Richard left, I couldn't just sit still. My mind was a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and disbelief. How could the man I'd spent 3 decades with betray me like this? And what about Laura? Who was she really? I needed to know more. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I reached out to an old friend named Jack. He used to be a private investigator before retiring to run a small bookstore in town. Over coffee, I told him everything. The affair, Emily's involvement, and my suspicions that Richard might have been hiding even more than I realized. Jack listened intently, his expression grim. Mary, he said finally, if you want answers, we'll dig deep. But are you ready for whatever we find? I nodded without hesitation. If there was one thing I knew for sure, it was that ignorance wasn't bliss. It was agony. Jack got to work immediately, digging into Richard's financial records and phone logs. Meanwhile, I tried to keep myself busy, but it was impossible not to feel like my world was crumbling around me. One night, as I sat alone in the living room staring at the fireplace, Emily walked in. She looked hesitant, almost afraid to speak. Mom, she began softly, I need to tell you something. Her voice cracked and she took a shaky breath. Dad, he didn't just start seeing Laura recently. They've been in contact for years, since before I moved to Manhattan. He always swore it was over between them, but now I think he lied. My stomach churned. Years? This wasn't just some fleeting indiscretion. It was a pattern. A betrayal that had festered beneath the surface of our lives for far too long. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but instead I just sat there, numb. How could I have missed it? Armed with Jack's findings, I started piecing together a plan. Richard had transferred large sums of money to Laura's account over the past year, enough to raise eyebrows if anyone at his firm found out. There were also emails suggesting they weren't just romantically involved. They were planning something bigger. Maybe moving away together? Or worse, starting a life where Richard left me completely behind? Whatever it was, I knew I couldn't let him get away with it. I decided to confront him, not with tears or accusations but with cold, hard facts. I gathered all the evidence Jack had uncovered and wrote down everything I wanted to say. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of control returning. If Richard thought he could destroy our family without consequences, he was dead wrong. As I prepared for my showdown with Richard, I noticed a change in Emily. She stopped defending him and started asking questions. About the investigation, about what I planned to do next. One afternoon she sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands trembling around a mug of tea. Mom, she said quietly, I'm sorry. Truly sorry. I should have told you sooner. I was scared, I didn't want to lose Dad, but I see now how much I hurt you. Let me help fix this. It was the apology I'd been waiting for, though I wasn't sure I could trust her yet. So I nodded. Together, we went over the documents Jack had provided, strategizing how to expose Richard's lies without destroying ourselves in the process. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't entirely alone. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than I expected. Richard called, saying he wanted to talk. When he showed up at the house, his face was pale, his usual confidence replaced by unease. I invited him into the living room where Emily and I waited silently. As soon as he sat down, I placed the folder containing all the evidence on the coffee table between us. "You have two choices," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Either you leave Laura for good, cut off all contact and publicly apologize for everything you've done, or I take this to your firm, the media, and anyone else who will listen. Your reputation, your career, your precious little secret life with Laura. It all ends." Richard's jaw dropped. He stammered, trying to negotiate, but I held firm. This was non-negotiable. Laura, however, wasn't about to go down without a fight. Within days, she leaked information to a local journalist claiming that Richard had embezzled funds from his firm to finance their relationship. The story blew up overnight, plastering Richard's face across news outlets and social media. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly reached out, offering condolences or gossiping under the guise of concern. While part of me felt vindicated, another part recoiled at the chaos. Was this really what I wanted? To drag everyone through the mud? But then I remembered the pain Richard had caused, not just me but Emily too, and I reminded myself that justice often comes at a price. In the midst of the scandal, Emily became my rock. She helped me navigate interviews with reporters, manage calls from nosy neighbors, and even deal with the fallout at Richard's firm. One evening, as we sat side by side on the couch watching the sunset, she turned to me and said, "You're stronger than him, Mom. Stronger than both of them." Her words brought tears to my eyes. Not because they were kind but because they were true. For so long I'd defined myself by my role as a wife and mother, letting others dictate my worth. But now, stripped of those labels, I realized I was capable of so much more. Slowly but surely I began imagining a future where Richard no longer controlled my happiness, or my identity. Richard came to see me one last time, looking defeated and desperate. "Please, Mary," he begged, "don't do this. We can still fix things." But I shook my head. "It's too late," I said firmly. "You made your choice when you chose her over us. Now it's time for me to make mine." He pleaded some more, but I refused to budge. Eventually he left, shoulders slumped, carrying nothing but a suitcase and the weight of his mistakes. Watching him walk away felt strange, like closing a chapter of my life that had once seemed endless. Yet as the door clicked shut behind him, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. For the first time in months I could breathe freely. With Richard gone, I decided it was time to reclaim my life. For years I'd dreamed of opening a small bakery, a cozy little shop where people could gather for fresh-baked goods and warm conversation. It had always been just a fantasy, something I tucked away in the back of my mind while juggling the demands of being a wife and mother. But now, with nothing holding me back, I threw myself into making it a reality. Emily surprised me by offering to help design the space, using her marketing expertise to create a brand that felt authentically me. Together, we transformed an old storefront on Main Street into sweet beginnings, complete with floral wallpaper, vintage furniture, and shelves lined with homemade pies, cookies, and cakes. On opening day, as customers streamed in and praised my creations, I felt a spark of joy I hadn't known in years. Despite the progress I was making, healing wasn't linear. Some nights I still woke up feeling hollow, wondering how 30 years of love could vanish so quickly. Other times, anger bubbled to the surface, reminding me of all the moments Richard had lied to me. Emily and I spent countless evenings talking about these emotions, slowly rebuilding the trust between us. She confessed that she'd carried guilt for months, blaming herself for enabling Richard's betrayal. "I should have stood by you from the start," she said one night, tears streaming down her face. I pulled her close, assuring her that forgiveness wasn't just for him, it was for us. As painful as everything had been, it forced us to confront truths we might otherwise have ignored. And in doing so, we found a bond stronger than ever before. While I focused on moving forward, Richard's life spiraled out of control. The scandal at his firm led to an internal investigation, which uncovered not only the embezzlement charges Laura had exposed but also other unethical practices he'd engaged in over the years. He lost his job, his reputation, and most of his friends. Rumor had it he moved to a small apartment in Albany, living off savings and odd jobs. Occasionally I wondered if he regretted his choices, if he missed the life we once shared, but those thoughts never lingered long. What mattered was that he no longer held power over me. His downfall served as a reminder that actions have consequences, and justice, though delayed, eventually finds its way. As for Laura, her plan to ruin Richard ultimately backfired. Once the media frenzy died down, people turned their attention to her role in the scandal. Former colleagues came forward, accusing her of manipulating Richard and exploiting their affair for personal gain. Her career imploded almost overnight and she disappeared from public view entirely. Part of me felt sorry for her. After all, she'd clearly been hurt by Richard in the past, but another part couldn't muster any sympathy. She'd chosen revenge over integrity and in doing so destroyed not only him but also herself. Watching her fall reminded me of something Jack had said early on: people who live in darkness rarely see the light. Months passed and life in Maplewood settled into a new rhythm. Sweet Beginnings became a local favorite, drawing customers from neighboring towns and even earning a feature in a regional magazine. Emily continued helping me run the business while pursuing her own passions, including photography. We laughed more, argued less, and learned to cherish the simple joys of being together. One evening, as we closed up the shop and walked home under a starry sky, Emily linked her arm through mine. "You know, Mom," she said with a smile, "I think we're going to be okay." I nodded, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. Okay didn't mean perfect. It meant resilient, hopeful, and ready to embrace whatever came next. Just when I thought I'd uncovered every secret, Jack dropped a bombshell. Over dinner one night, he admitted that he'd crossed paths with Laura years ago. Not professionally but personally. They'd been married briefly before divorcing under messy circumstances. "She cheated on me," he confessed, his voice tinged with bitterness. "When you hired me to investigate Richard, I saw it as a chance to settle the score. Not just for you but for myself." His revelation stunned me. All this time I'd assumed his involvement was purely professional. Now I realized he'd been driven by his own pain and desire for revenge. Instead of feeling betrayed, though, I felt oddly grateful. Without his determination, I might never have uncovered the truth, or found the strength to rebuild my life. I confronted Jack about his motives, half expecting him to apologize or distance himself. Instead, he looked me straight in the eye and said, "Mary, I won't lie to you. My reasons for helping you weren't entirely selfless. But somewhere along the way I started caring about you, not because of what you were going through but because of who you are. You're brave, kind, and fiercely independent. If anything, working with you reminded me that second chances aren't just possible, they're worth fighting for." His honesty disarmed me. While I couldn't ignore the irony of trusting someone who'd initially sought revenge, I also couldn't deny the connection we'd formed. So instead of pushing him away, I chose to lean in, to see where this unexpected partnership might lead. On a crisp autumn morning, I stood outside Sweet Beginnings, watching leaves swirl in the breeze. Business was steady, Emily was thriving, and for the first time in decades I felt truly free. Free from Richard's lies, free from societal expectations, and free to define happiness on my own terms. Sure, there were scars, memories that would always linger, but they no longer defined me. Life, I realized, is full of surprises. Sometimes the hardest endings pave the way for the most beautiful beginnings. As I locked up the shop and headed home hand in hand with Jack, I smiled to myself. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew I was ready to face them, with courage, grace, and a heart full of hope.